a little bit of Red Bull today instead of a beer because unique circumstance. We're squeezing this in on a lunch break today. We're talking to someone who's across the pond, for lack of a better way to put it. But this is our next video. This is a video we've been waiting to do for a long time in that post-season coverage, I guess, sitting down with anyone involved teaching or arranging for these top DCI groups, or I won't even say just DCI groups in general, just to kind of pick their brains about the book itself, their approach, all that good stuff. So before I let Evan take it away, welcome everyone to the Aged Out Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Michael Fantini, and with me as always is
Evan Worrell.
And we'll make this short and sweet, hopefully. I say that every time, and it doesn't always happen. But comment, like, subscribe, share the video with anyone you think would appreciate it. Facebook, Instagram, Patreon.com, or the join button right here on YouTube if you want to support us financially. Or you can head over to agedoutpodcast.com now and grab a logo t-shirt or a logo sticker if you want to grab some of that and support us there. Aged Out Fundamentals. Play triplet rolls for 15 minutes straight. It's worth it. Link to the playlist in the description. Your hands will thank you later. Your brain will thank you later. All right, that's it. Evan, take it, and we'll jump in.
We got linked up with our guest today, Aaron Fisher, through a mutual friend, TJ Chiquette, who has known Aaron. And, you know, we've always interested to dive deep into the Paul Rennick, Vanguard, Sandy Rennick culture and just kind of like their philosophies. And so we were grateful that Aaron reached out and was happy to do so. And joining us from Germany, right, Aaron?
Exactly.
Yeah, well, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is literally the first time we've all ever talked. We've been chit-chatting through text messages and Facebook Messenger, but yeah, it's our first opportunity to really meet Aaron, and graciously he's given up some time for us to just kind of pick his brain on, you know, using Vanguard 2024 as a background to talk about what they do and the success that they've had. So, you know, I'm looking forward to it. But before we get into it, tell them a little bit about yourself, just, you know, how you got hooked up with Paul and Sandy, the team, how long you've been around in the game.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. And it's great to meet you both as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've been around for a little while. I'm originally from Dallas, Texas, actually Coppell High School, if you know it. When I went there, actually, we weren't as good as they are now. So that really started a few years after I graduated. So yeah, phenomenal stuff over there. I'm from the Dallas area. I went to UNT and studied music at first, but I was there for about 4 years, and then I changed my major, switched to engineering, went, you know, completely different direction. And that's what I've been doing since. But what I realized that I could still, take as much time as I can to still be involved in the activity, still teach. And so it's like a part-time job for me is what I would say. I still teach with some high school groups as well. In terms of my marching experience, I started in 2010 with Phantom Regiment. So I've been with Paul for quite a while now, almost 15 years.
Good year to start
decent.
on.
That was all right. I was pretty young, actually. It was before my senior year of high school, so I didn't know what I was doing. You can see if you watch the line, I'm the guy on the far right, and I just look like 10 years younger than everyone else, mostly because I was. I mean, most of them were like 21, 22.
Yeah.
You know, can you imagine like some 16-year-old, you know, Nick Taylor's your center snare, and he's just like, here's how it should be. And, you know, so it was like jumping into the deep end, but it was a great experience. Obviously, you know, we could play pretty clean. I didn't have all the chops at the time. To be honest, I think if, you know, just the level of the activity has come such a long way in terms of like the content, like what the players are asked to do visually and musically. And I say this, I was young when I started. There's no way I could play this book this last summer when I was that age, you know. So I was sort of lucky for the time that I started. But, you know, I took what I could get. When Paul went to Vanguard, then of course I marched from 11 through 14, and I was the center snare in 13 and 14.
That's a lot of drum corps. It's like five seasons, right?
That's 5 years.
That's a lot of drum corps.
I actually had a bonus summer that I didn't do, so I could have done 15. But I said, you know, this is more than enough. So I sort of seen like a passing of the guard, sort of like I was part of like this, where I witnessed the older generation of the group who was at Regiment, and sort of by 14, that was sort of like the foundations of, you know, all those groups since then at Vanguard, and most of the guys who are teaching march somewhere in that age.
Yep.
And then I've been teaching ever since.
Well, man, I'm just super excited to finally get to pick somebody on that team and environment's brain. Because there's so much, I feel like, speculation from the outside looking in of like how you all approach the drum, how you approach rehearsal etiquette, rehearsal technique, what you talk about, what you don't talk about, stick velocity, the tuning. So I don't know, Evan, if you want to get into a little bit of that first and then watch the lot video from finals day, or...
Yeah, I guess the philosophy for me starts with like the exercises. You know, if you go to a Vanguard lot, you're definitely not going to see like, oh, what's the like latest like snare feature they've worked into the accent tap exercise. That's not what it is.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like they've had their staples for a long time. We know what works: eights, legatos, some accent taps, some rolls, some triplet doubles, triplet timing, some sort of thing. We're gonna play some gallop. You know, it seems like the philosophy, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, holds tried and true with that team. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's no secret that we play the basic exercises because we think that those are what will set us up for success the most, right? You only like the way we look at it is I don't think we have any ill will towards like other exercises, other creative things to do. I mean, that's
Right.
like one of the most important things you can do as a player is learn and play a lot of different things. So most of the players in the line are playing even like other people's exercises and stuff, learning it for fun, like everyone does, anyone who loves the activity. But in the summer, the way we look at it is you only have so much time, right? And if we spend time on those cool exercises, then that takes away time from what we can work on with the book. And in terms of, the approach, I mean, one thing to say right out the gate is, I can speak for myself. I'm not like representing the organization or Paul, but, that's why, TJ and I, talked about it a little bit. And he and I used to talk all the time. I didn't mention, but I lived in Atlanta for a while.
Oh, okay.
And I
Gotcha.
So I taught Quest when I was out there, and that's how I got connected with TJ. So he and I have, for almost 8 years, we've talked about approach and technique and stuff like that. And I really enjoyed, talking about that stuff. The thing is, like with what we do, there's typically a reason for everything. So because of that, it's easy to talk about, right? It's easy to sort of say we play this because it helps us with that. But I don't want to take any credit because the reality is like all of what we do came from before I was in the group, right? Paul has been doing his thing for such a long time, and whether it's at North Texas or Regiment or Crown before that or BK, Skyriders, I think before that, he's had an incredible effect on effect with an A on the activity, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Not only are there a lot of other rangers doing it, but and I think he would say, he would just point to his instructors. He would point to these are the guys that I learned from. This is what I learned. So you're always standing on the shoulders of giants. So it's not my idea to play eights. But what I will say is that we don't play any exercises that work on specific things. Like you can't extract our approach from the exercises we play. I would say it's a bit more simple, which is we play whatever we think is going to make us play better, right? We play whatever we think we need to make sure that they're ready for the music. And that can change year to year. And it's certainly changed. Like one thing we do is we have like a really creative approach to like the sort of stuff we play. And I think sometimes when you have like a written out exercise, sometimes you just like play that all the time. But what we do is like what you see in a lot is like the tip of the iceberg. And then we do a bunch of other stuff in the off season. And
so
for us, that's what's exciting.
Would it be fair to say that having those simpler, more just basic exercises, just hammering those fundamentals a little bit in a more simplified way, the idea is to allow the members to focus on more of how they're doing what they're doing instead of the content of what they're doing, to more so dial in the ears before you get to the book, dial in that player-to-player balance, and allows you to focus more on that instead of getting all those double flam drags out in a row and then the invert turnaround. And
yeah, exactly. So I think that's, Paul would probably say it the same way, that it's like, one thing we talk about is that there's no credit without achievement, right? So if you're not able to achieve it at a certain level, then it doesn't matter if it's the hardest thing in the world. You're not going to get that credit for it. So everything we do, we're trying to play as well as possible. And I think that's why we play simple, basic exercises when we're warming up. The focus here in the lot is just what can we play right now to make sure we play well right now. It's not we play this because we want to work on our technique, or we play this because we think we need to chop out, or there's no like like ideology that we're bound to. It's really just pragmatic.
Right.
It's what is going to sound good. So if we have like a lick that we want to work on, we'll just come up with some exercise that works on that lick, and that's typically one of the best ways you can improve it. Sometimes you just need to rep it a bunch. So, I've tried in the past to like write a book of like all the things, like to say this is the approach, right? And it's just impossible because it's
malleable and moldable depending on the demands of that season and that book you're playing and perfecting.
Yes, but also I would say that it's not that the approach can be defined by like the exercises we're playing, rather by our mindset to the music.
Right. Makes sense.
That just filters through to everything else.
No, it makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a bunch of sense. I have some other questions, but I think I'll let us get into this a little bit as far as the show music, and that way we can use this as some reference points too, and obviously just enjoy what the Vanguard Battery was able to accomplish at the end of the year, not just with like, obviously winning the trophy, but just, the excellence that was achieved. So.
Yep. So this video, before we jump in, got to give credit where credit is due. Marching Vlogs. Go subscribe to Marching Vlogs channel. Link to the original videos in the description. They put out great content every summer. Go support them. It's even more important you subscribe to them than this video you're watching with us. So go do that for sure. Support that channel. All right, let's jump in. And like Evan said, we'll just pause if we need it. If you want us to stop at any point, just say pause and you want to talk about something, whatever, and we'll just let it go.
Sounds good.
God, just moved in and out of those singles to doubles, back to singles, and just so seamlessly.
I know that for most of the year. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say those singles at the end. It's actually like this 5-lit over the bar line thing. So 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 4 5 1 2 3 4 5. So that's like the speed of what that is. I think it's like 200 or something like that. So those singles are reefed.
Yeah.
So
and that's the opening statement for the show. That's sort of like we come in.
Go ahead, 200 aggressive, super aggressive. Like I think that to me, I'm not gonna put words in his mouth, but like I could imagine like the team thinking like, all right, we know we're gonna have to go on early for the beginning part of the season just because we're coming back from the year off. Let's make a statement right out of the gate. Like the book just felt super aggressive throughout a lot of moments. So.
Yeah, I would say for sure it's, I think it's one of the hardest books Paul's ever written. Or actually, my impression is that it's the most challenging overall percussion package that I've seen from Paul and Sandy. I mean, even what the front ensemble is doing, but I know we're focused on the battery here. I mean, this is the first thing that they play and they come out and they're just, sort of going for it. I mean, I would ask, a question to you guys. What's your perception in terms of like, what would you think that we're going for in that phrase in terms of like how we're approaching the drum? Would you say that it's all loud, it's soft? How would you like interpret the phrasing?
My interpretation of the phrasing is like, obviously it starts off with a quad thing and then just kind of like layers in and it builds to like this climactic finish, like what you're just talking about through some of like the 5-lits and stuff, the singles, and then you have this like kind of capsulation of like it's a quick hit introduction, like all right, this is Vanguard 2024, just like quick summarization of what you're about to, like almost like a teaser for what's about to happen throughout the rest of the show.
It's like the YouTube podcast that gives you like those 3 random sound bites at the very beginning and then goes into the actual beginning of the podcast to be like, hey, listen, more of this is coming later. So that's a good way to put it.
I think that's a good way to put it too. I can't really, speak for Paul, but I would say that my perception is that it's like exactly what that moment needs. What the brass plays right after this is this big hit, right? That they just start out sort of loud and it transitions from this like really expressive front ensemble moment at the top of the show with some like rope drum and some like small ensemble stuff. And this is supposed to connect those two things. And I think it seems like the way he does it is that not only is it aggressive and loud so that you're not surprised by a big horn hit, right? If it ended soft, if it didn't end, challenging, then it wouldn't come across that way. But also it can't just be, loud out the gate. So there's a few moments where they really drop out. I think that that's what makes it, feel so effective. And it, as a, instructor, and as players, I think that our goal is just how can we communicate the music that Paul put to the page. And yeah, that's at least what I hear. I think they're going to play it again, but like try to notice like how soft some of the stuff is, even in the context of a percussion feature on the back hash.
Yep. All right, let's get that rep again.
Right there. Or like going into those singles.
Yeah. Little diminuendo before.
That shot that the brass come in, that thing like speaks over the top. That's one of my favorite moments.
Is that the shot Robert was talking about, Evan?
It may have been
the shot that's still being heard in the Alamo Dome right now. There was some shot Robert, Drum Corps Coffee Shop Man, was talking about. He went in for San Antonio, and he's like, there's a shot that Vanguard played in their show that I swear is still echoing around that stadium now. It was like the loudest, best shot I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, I think what makes it sound so loud is how there's an absence of sound before it. There's the sound system is playing the like theme for the show, like the Kendrick Lamar, I hope you find some. So they play that sample in that space, and you just hear shot dome. So cool. Sometimes like really simple things like that are just so effective, and sets up the brass for what they're about to play.
And this whole phrase they're playing, is the brass still wailing over top this? This is all underneath because they're playing to their eyeballs. I would guess they're playing rolls above their heads. So,
yeah, that's one thing is when you watch them, it's hard to tell when the brass are playing and when they're not, because all of it is pretty challenging.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is easier than say like the single, fast singles at 200, but
sometimes you just need to do your job. There's certain phrases where they just need the drum line to be tempo underneath the horn line, so they can be exposed and have their moments and lead the show along the timeline.
Yeah, a lot of this to me just feels like, we're gonna keep our foot on the gas, like momentum, keep it moving.
Everything they're doing is supporting the brass or the phrasing. And one thing I love about Paul's writing is you can usually hear the phrasing of the entire ensemble, even just listening to the battery.
Yeah.
Even though we're behind the brass and probably no judge is going to be able to hear that stuff. One thing, because there's a lot of conversations about like how does arranging work in this world with the judge on the front of the field, and I can tell you that my perception of what we're doing is whatever we think it should be, whatever Paul thinks it's supposed to be from the top, like that's what he writes. And if that means that it's dense, if it means that there's space, he writes that because that's what he thinks is going to sound good from the full ensemble. And to be honest, when you watch it, you hear all those little bass drum notes, like those runs, those lyrical runs that are leading you to the next phrase. And there's something about like the way all this stuff comes together that it elevates the full package. I think that we play a lot in this show. I mean, that's something.
Oh, very much so.
You can see there's a lot.
It's funny you said that. Yeah, like we were talking about the exercises, and you're like, like blah blah blah, and like it's simple. But I was like, I wrote down content made up in the book because you did like Vanguard definitely played a lot more than probably 90% of the groups, just as far as like volume of notes.
Notes per minute of the show.
Which is funny because when I started marching, I remember that was like something that people would, they would say we had the fewest notes, right? Stuff like that. And I think it really shows you like how something I really respect about Paul, which is that he's always just writing for whatever he thinks is right for that time.
Yeah.
Right. And for one thing, I don't think that we didn't play, many notes back in the day either. I think that's like a, some perception thing. But here, I mean, it would be really easy for him to say, let's not play so much because we're behind the horns. And maybe he wants to do that. I don't know, but I think the part of him that knows what's going to sound the best, that's what's, is brought to the forefront. That's what he, is always going for. I think is, what's going to sound the best, what's going to elevate the full package. And in this case, it means playing a lot of the show. Just the nature of the way that the music is structured.
Whether it's heard from a nuanced level is kind of irrelevant, but it has to feel right for the show's purpose.
Maybe I'll ask you what you mean by that, whether it's heard from
like what we're saying, like if they're back behind the back hash like 20 yards, like you're probably not going to hear like all the like nitty gritty of if like one person like pinches out a left hand diddle, like you're not going to hear it on that level, but you're going to feel it the way it's supposed to be felt for the full ensemble, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And the shots, I mean, for one thing, you can tell if it's clean or not because the shots come through, right? And
right.
And if you hear some some dirty shots coming through, then you know that maybe it's not together back there. But you're right, it's really hard to read from a clarity standpoint. But if you think about it from like a arranging standpoint, or of like what is the musical package, I would say, and again, I can't talk about the arranging. I'll leave that for Paul. But when you think about like a drum set player, right? Ghost notes and drum set, like there are some drum set players that play their ghost notes so soft you barely even hear them. But if you stripped out everything in the recording and you just heard those little ghost notes, they're going to come through. If no one else played on the field and you just heard the snares playing a piano roll in the back hash, you can hear that from the box. So even though you don't notice it, it's part of the sound. And,
right.
I think that everything they play matters, or they wouldn't be playing it, right? It's not just, it only matters if you can read everything that they're doing. Some things aren't meant to be transcribed. You know what I mean? Some things are meant to be heard and experienced.
Evan said this before. Some things are meant to be felt and not heard. Because we see it in shows all the time. I think Blue Coats did it this year when they were in the back corner where they're playing some stuff on the rubber tips. You're not supposed to really hear what they're playing. You're just supposed to feel the impact on the soundscape of what's going on in the show. So I completely understand what you're saying.
I think the ghost note's that's a good reference.
Yeah, very much so. I want to ask a more technical question for a second while we have the video pause before we jump back into it. You're talking about dynamics, and even if they played a piano roll here, you guys don't talk about heights really. It's all just about what volume of sound the music needs, right? And or is that a false statement? We've heard things from the outside about that. Like you all don't really talk about, oh, this has to be down at 3+ inches or whatever. It's more of like, we need this to be piano. And if that means your height for your piano to blend and balance is a little bit visually higher than the person next to you, it's the sound that we care about.
Yeah, so it's good. It's a great question. I think that's probably like one of the most obvious things from the outside that's different. It seems like it's changing. I think 15 years ago, it felt like no one else did dynamics and everyone just did heights. And now I think there's a lot of groups that do at least both. In terms of what we do, every instructor is different. And I can talk a bit about like the teaching philosophy in a bit as well, but everyone sort of has a different approach. But I would say in general, we use heights and we use, dynamics as well. So the goal is to play piano, right? That's why heights exist, is we play lower to the head so that it's easier to play at a slower velocity.
It's a reference point.
Yeah. And I guess what we would say is, yes, of course, we use heights. It's not like their heights are all over the place.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like small. It could be that there's
alluding to. Minor differences player to player.
Well, the reason for that is what we're focusing on is the velocity. What we're focusing on is the balance, the blend. And maybe, if you close your ears and you watch, you could pick out some differences in the height. I would say that, most of the struggle is to do the opposite. That if I close my eyes, do I hear just one sound? That's much more challenging. And you can all play the same heights and have like, different velocity, right? Everyone knows like obvious examples. And so what we're focused on is the sound first. And sometimes height is like a tool to achieve that, Sometimes the issue is that someone is returning too high and therefore they don't, there's too much room and all they can do is be late or be too loud. But our focus is always, we use heights as a means to an end, which is sort of what they're intended for originally. So if it's piano, even dynamics are reference points, right?
Exactly.
What is piano is relative. It totally depends. So we have a really pragmatic, old school approach, which is make it sound like this, right? We try to understand the music. And that's something that Paul does a great job of, is putting the music in the hands of the players. And I would say that's one of the most striking things about the group and the way that we approach teaching in the summer is that we're not saying play this at this dynamic, at this height. It's, this is what I want to feel. This is what I want to stick out of the texture. You're playing this part so that the front ensemble can pick up on that. Or the end of the quad break goes into a baritone solo, right? So it's more about like the music itself from like a pure standpoint, and not here's like the recipe to, you know, achieve those sounds, if that makes sense. And sometimes it means play higher, right? That's a completely valid comment that we give. But I would rather than play different heights and play the same volume than the opposite.
Yes.
But of course we try to do.
Yeah, if you can do both, for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah. So Evan, do you want to piggyback off that, or we can go into that the whole?
Let's keep it rolling for a little bit.
Let's get back to the video. We can revisit.
I'll double back.
All right.
To some velocity comments here in a little bit. Golf clap.
Yeah.
This finals lot, actually, the crowd was giving it up for a few moments. There was some interesting stuff. Actually, one of the snare drummers like blew a head, and so they had to change his head, and then he came back in.
Delicate entrance. Dude, coming off those presses.
Stop there.
Word. Yep.
So that's sort of like the first exposed snare break. They've got, I think, 4 snare breaks and 4 quad breaks in the show. Like quite a lot of exposure. But man, that thing. So what's happening underneath that is the main like Kendrick Lamar theme. So the bum 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 bum. So there's a ton of space, and you just hear that come sort of out of nowhere. So I love what he did with like the management of the space in terms of like how they're trying to approach it. I mean, you know, first of all, for sure, playing something that exposed is like gut wrenching. It's like so nerve wracking to have like complete silence, and then you just come in off the edge with some like really soft, you know, triplets, and you know, everyone has like moments of exposure like that. But what's notable is that there's also no like reference point for time around that. So that's where like getting them to feel time the same way and think about the part the same way like makes a huge difference. What I was saying is at the beginning of this lot, at the beginning of this video, like one of the snares just came back because he like missed the whole subs lot apparently, because of a head change, and he came back in and Paul was like, oh, give it up for Eli, and Eli just like gets right back in there and like nothing ever happened. So, and I think the crowd went a little nuts for that because they recognize adversity and they're impressed by the fact that they can just like get back to it. Yeah.
Dude, yeah, the lot culture has become pretty, I don't know, I would say incredible. There's a few people that are like, all right, you can calm down a little bit, but you know.
I was getting ready to say, I like the hype. I will say there is a line that some do cross from time to time, but not many. People usually, when they give it up, it's in a encouraging, respectful way, and it's not like trying to distract the performers from what they're doing. It's just letting them know, I'm loving what you're doing right now. So I love how big it's gotten.
It's definitely changed a lot over the years.
Yeah, for sure.
We don't do a lot to like cater to the lot, right? We're not like, you know, we don't have a moment where we turn around and we say, hey, everyone, welcome. We're going to play this for you. You know, we treat the lot as it's for us. And if people want to watch it, they're more than welcome to. But we try to find, you know, a space where we can like hear ourselves and just get to business and just be pragmatic about it. You know,
although I do remember a funny quote from the 2010 lot on video where Paul was like, good vibes, we're going on early. And I was like, all right,
all right, let's keep moving.
Those crosses are not easy.
I was getting ready to say, they covered a lot of distance horizontally. I'll rewind because there's a bass feature right now, but while I'm saying, I was about to point out, it's always amazes me, and it's always present in Paul's quad writing. They do some very, very fast, big horizontal switches and crossovers and stuff, which is always wild. As a snare drummer, blows my mind how that happens at that tempo.
I also said this early season, but it felt like this was like, I haven't seen Paul write a ton of just like focused bass breaks or bass solos like he did this year.
We did have 2 this year, which is I guess it's definitely more than the average because there's a, you know, I think bass solos are not that common, but we usually have 1 every year. I think most of the time Paul Paul writes one. I
We'll
can
throw
think
one
of
in.
22 and 19. Typically, we always have one. This moment, by the way, they're like behind the brass. They're moving around, and it's really integrated with the brass. So the brass have some trading solos as well. And so it's crazy that bass solo that we're about to hear, it's so nuanced and subtle, and they're behind the back hash, and the front ensemble comes off of that with dum, dum, right, unison double laterals across the entire ensemble, reading this, sort of jacked sounding lick. It's like tasty and nuanced, and then somehow they're still able to read that. And I think the key there is, I've seen Sandy and Paul talk about this on in interviews and stuff, but it's really true that the number one priority for them and for the group is to understand the music and understand what the parts around you. It's sort of like if you speak a language, you know what people are saying, even if they whisper. Whereas if you don't speak it, like, it doesn't matter how much someone yells at you. It's not going to translate. You're not going to be able to catch it. And so, you don't always have to shout for someone to be able to hear that next thing.
Mm-hmm. Right. Get this. Check. Settle. Finish. I think too, like what you said about like there's no credit without achievement is like exponentially higher in bass drum land. If there's no achievement there, like the credit is like I have no clue what's happening.
Yeah, you can't tell what's going on if it's not good at all.
Yeah, definitely. So all of this is like a larger impact moment the brass are playing in front of them.
Can we talk about your all's approach to body, or a perceived lack thereof sometimes, with the state of the activity? And I am your all's biggest defenders in this, by the way. This is not me being like, you guys don't do the visual stuff that everybody else does. I think everybody else does too much, personally. But
I would say that, it's part of the activity, right? And so if we're not doing enough to contribute to the show, that's something that has to be, corrected. And the visual team, is on that. I would say that when it comes to like the way we fit into the full picture, they do quite a lot. The core as a whole, like the visual staff for Vanguard, it's very dance heavy. It's very heavy on, movement. But, I would say that like we always think of the context of that body. And so we're not going to prioritize turning around if we're not going to be able to hear something that we want to hear. So it's, the focus is on the music, but for sure they're doing a lot. That example, for example, that one that they just did where they're going to plie, the whole core does it. And so they're doing that in unison. But every break that we have, they have body. There's not really a moment where they stand there, but it seems like it comes and goes in waves, right? The trend with body. Sometimes it feels like everyone wants to do as much body as possible. And then some years it feels like it's cool if you just like stand still. I think we just do the same thing, which is we do whatever we think fits the music, whatever feels musical visually, and then what fits the show.
And that's why I think it never really stands out to me. And my intent with that question wasn't to like, gotcha, you all don't do this thing that everybody else do, because you do body. What I'm hearing you say in return is it's you're pragmatist about it. We do what we need to make the visual portion of it or the visual element fit with the show. And that's why when I watch your all stuff, I hardly ever notice or have the thought, oh, they're not doing all this crazy intricate footwork and twists and like it. You do what you need to for the show. So it doesn't stick out really that unless you're really analyzing the body or what they're doing or not doing potentially, it doesn't hinder you. It doesn't hinder you. You don't notice it because it's what you do fits, and that's the extent of it.
A big reason you don't notice it is because of how we treat the lot. We don't do most of the body.
Right.
That's one. That's just one thing is that we're standing there playing, and most other groups like wear them for at least the last 20 minutes, and they're like doing lot drill and stuff like that. And so I think when you come watch us in the lot, you might think that all we do is stand there and play. But if you watch the show, I don't think that perception is you would have the same perception at least.
Right. In the counterpoint,
I think there's other groups that do body really well and maybe are like pushing the boundaries, and we're not pushing the boundaries all the time, right? So,
it's again what the show requires, which is the moral of the story up to this point to me. You all are the masters of what does the show demand? What do we need to do in this moment, etc.?
I do think some other groups create balance tick issues for themselves with the choreography that they do, right? Just because like there's so many body facings, like you said, like we're not going to turn around because you're not going to hear what we want you to hear. So yeah, that makes sense.
There's moments where we do that. It like I didn't mean we'll never turn around.
No, right. We got you. We got you. Yeah.
We want to hear. Yeah.
Yeah. We follow. All right. Are they about to pull their hearts
definitely
out?
Some. If it was Mythbusters, I would say plausible, but mostly denied. That starts so soft, and then the whole core reads that. It's a tempo change too. All this split stuff, by the way, they're like behind the back hash, and it's like on one hand you could say maybe we don't even need to do this because no one is noticing it, no one's giving credit. But it's because when you listen to the full ensemble, the brass are also supporting some stuff. It's quartered up German, so that.
Good job going into the threes.
I love fast threes.
I know. They look so cool. They sound so great. I'm going to back up because that phrase was a masterclass in building an extended phrase and not overdoing it at any point, just like pacing it super well. I think I'm back. We'll just start here and let it build.
Most of that's the right. So I mean, in terms of, I want to talk about these. So number one, the arranging is what creates that sense of pacing that it just keeps building and building, and you think you're at the end, and you're still not quite there. So
yeah,
I would say a vast majority that's the arranging, coupled with the way that they play it, which is if they played really loud from the beginning and tried to treat that as one long thing and tried to crescendo linearly, it's going to feel like they're hacking. It's going to feel like they're playing too loud.
It would have gotten stagnant. Yeah.
So I'm sure you want to go back to the velocity question that you alluded to earlier. Maybe that's a good moment for it.
Yeah. So I think that there is perception out there. Like, some people say that it's kind of the way you guys balance out the line seems to be like from the middle out, or at least like not that like it's every single person like pyramid, but that there's a concentrated effort for the outside, let's say 2 on a 9-man snare line to not overbalance the middle 5. Is there any like talk about that or discussion about that or like philosophy on that? I'm sure a lot of it depends on the way they're staged, the forms that they're in on the field.
Yeah, so one thing is with Michael Gaines' drill, he amazing, phenomenal drill writer. One thing he does is that they're always in sort of like different, interesting forms. So every snare feature we have, especially because of the context of the show's about a vagabond, like people that are in sort of isolation, discovering their identity, and then building together as a group. So as short as I can say, it's about that. And what that means is that there's a lot of clusters at the beginning of the show and a lot of big open forms at the end of the show. And so most of the features, they tend to be in some, different forms and like little clusters. I don't think there's any truth to us. We're definitely not trying to get them to play softer on the ends, but for sure they shouldn't play louder than the people inside of them. So if you're trying to listen and blend inside of a line, then what you want is to make sure that everyone's playing the same volume. If it drops off a little bit, that's better than if the ends are playing louder.
For sure.
But standing in front of them and I get to hear them, play down the line, and they're all so phenomenally talented. And if you listen to them one at a time, I don't think you would have that perception. It's true that like the players in the middle tend to be a bit more experienced or a bit older, and so maybe they look like they're putting a bit more oomph into it. But our goal is for it to be the same across the board. And generally, I think that's the case. I mean, look at this shot right here. Miles on the left end, he's playing just as loud probably as the guys in the middle. So we're not trying to. We don't play any games when it comes to the balance. We're really just saying, let's just all play this the same way. And however close we can get to that, the better. I think another thing is when you're used to maybe, because it's not that common for groups to focus so much on the balance, maybe it comes across as like this absence of sound because you're used to noticing more things happening.
Right.
And sometimes when we play, it feels a bit like there's less going on just because it's more maybe unified from like a blend and balance perspective. And I think that's something you only really notice in person, as opposed to, through video, you can't really.
Yeah, you lose a lot of the nuance of balance when you watch YouTube videos. We've talked about that a lot on here.
That's actually, I think what you said there too, I didn't really equate it to that, like it feels like less is going on. But, we were having a discussion with the Drum Corps Coffee Shop guys, George and Robert. And, we talked about when we were watching Vanguard in the lot, because one of the things that they asked us, like when we were recording with them, was like, hey, do you guys think that the judges got it right? And I said, I think that the group who won was the group who should have won.
Yeah.
And one of the things we mentioned was like when we were standing there watching them, it just felt like they were going to get it right every time. Like, rep it, it's going to be good. Rep it, it's going to be good. And there were some other groups where you did notice, like, just like, pop out. Like, it was just, there were more ticks, more balanced things, more hand pressure changes. But watching Vanguard in the lot, both semis and finals night, it just was like, yeah, this is the most consistent thing I've seen.
As an audience member, I was the most relaxed watching you all. I think we saw you on semis day. We didn't catch the finals lot because we were trying to stagger when we went to which group and all that stuff. You went over that earlier, that's right. But I just felt, I always put it this way, is I say this in indoor about certain groups, drum corps, when I'm in front of the group and I'm like, I'm just confident that it's going to be good. There's no doubt in my mind after hearing one rep. I'm like, you can see it on their face. You can watch their hands. Other groups, you're kind of almost on the edge of your seat a little bit, like waiting for the tick to tack to happen, or the first couple double strokes of a roll to not be in on this side, or it was just, you're just relaxed. And Pulse gives you that in indoor, I think. I have that feeling with Pulse when they walk on the floor a lot. Every group's had those years where you just know it's dialed in. So that's kind of how I could tell. I was like, right when I walked up to you all semis day and heard like the first rep of the book, I was like, this just feels comfortable.
That's really good to hear. I mean, when you're teaching a group, you never feel totally relaxed because you're,
I'm sure.
But I can't believe I didn't do this yet, but this group, I mean, I think it's probably my favorite year teaching because every person in the entire ensemble, the entire percussion ensemble, just fantastic, really teachable players, a lot of experience, a lot of skill, and maybe one, they also had a lot of adversity to overcome this season, right? Just from the nature of like going on a bit earlier and the fact that we didn't have a season in 2023, right? I think that's something that maybe people forget about because we come back and it's like we never left. But the vets that we haven't marched for 2 years, and at the beginning of the season, because we go in reverse order from finals the year before, we were going on first. And you look at other activities like BOA, WGI, like WGI prelims. One time, Quest went on after RCC, and we didn't even like think about that, right? So it's more normal. So there shouldn't be. It shouldn't really matter, And obviously, I also think that by the end, everything, people were noticing what they were doing, from the beginning, but it was really an uphill battle, and there was so much adversity for them to face, and they just handled it like champs. And I think that feeling of relaxation, of like knowing it's going to be good, I think they cut their teeth early season, sort of feeling a bit like we're going on before, 2 hours before our main competition in Utah. We were going on between Battalion and the Cascades in Utah, and then we did our show, loaded our trucks, had snack. We pulled out of the lot before troopers had gotten to the gate. For a sense of,
that's wild.
I have so much respect for all these groups. Like when you're marching open class groups or groups that go on earlier, it's hot. You have less time to rehearse. You wake up earlier. There's a lot of challenges that usually the top drum corps, we're a bit spoiled. We don't have to face those same challenges that those groups do, and it really molds a more mature player. There's something about having to go through a bit of adversity that makes you a bit stronger. So,
nope, fully agree.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
Yep. All right, I'm going to go ahead and say, for time's sake, let's let a little more music played. We have a lot more video to watch, just from like, we are squeezing this in on our lunch breaks and stuff, not to rush things along too much, but let's just enjoy some music for a minute.
Yeah, let's do it. This next chunk is 7/8 at 270.
To what?
270 beats per minute.
Okay.
So it's. I know it won't be synced with the video, but like the Met goes at 270 to start the chunk.
That's insane.
Obviously, their feet aren't doing that.
Yeah, they're doing a halftime at like 135.
They're not doing halftime. They're doing 4 and 3.
Oh.
Sometimes it goes into halftime. Sometimes it goes to the 180 as the dotted quarter note. Right there, halftime.
Ooh, that's so fast.
Jeez.
All of this, we're behind the brass, and it's full musical. So that's all. I love that chart. I mean, it's this.
That
I wonder why they did like 270 and not like a slower, but like different mathematical. It's interesting.
That had to
So
be
it's like-
fun as hell for them to play. That's I almost want to learn that, even though I know my hands could never get there at this point to play it that fast. But
Yeah. I mean, the first time I was there and the Met came on and it was like beep 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 beep. And I was like, what's about to happen? And then it just starts with this like sort of maybe understated. We're not like, one thing I like about Paul's writing is that he's not throwing the meter at you, right? It's not always obvious what that is.
Right.
But yeah, if you watch their feet, it's like for most of it.
that's
doing
cool.
the old peg leg pirate walk there.
Yeah,
The thing that impresses me the most about that is that the brass could do it, right? Like
interesting. Good for them.
drumline can do odd meters, but the brass really had to, that's impressive that they were able to take a whole
yeah.
chart that's had so much mixed meter in it. All right, the next thing is a snare break.
Another one.
Oof.
Can I pause in there for a sec?
Yep.
Sorry, just one thing. The end of that lick, those are 4s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. Boom.
So it's so fast, it comes off as an egg beater, but it's actually a 4.
Exactly. I think in person it comes across more like a 4, but I was watching videos and even I went out and I was like, what is that? What do you guys
Did they change it to an egg beater?
Yeah, so it's 4s. Crazy. I mean, crazy fast to play 2 4s back to back.
That is pretty rough.
Is it in a 6-tuplet rhythm though? Like 1, 2, 3, 4,
Yeah.
5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
That makes sense.
Yeah, try that one. Try that one
Triplet,
later.
triplet.
I don't even need to try it to know that I can't do it. So
4s are just. That's a tough one. And all that space too.
I feel like
So
he usually
right
likes to
there.
have 5 tenors. Did you guys like lose one, or is it always 4?
Yeah, we lost one.
Okay.
Like one, I think the last camp or something. They
Candy apple spirit to ear to.
and they're just. I mean, there's so much nuance in that lick, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it opens up. There's fast stuff, but all of these licks are sort of like a different challenge. Some of them are just.
Well,
Well, like you said,
his writing this year really ranged the entire gamut of skill sets for sure. Tons of variety. Go ahead, Evan.
Well, like you said earlier with like the shot was so impactful because of the absence of sound. Like, speed is more impactful when it's surrounded by space and like you're constantly, moving in and out. Vice versa, space is impressive when it comes out of speed. Like,
Big trombone feature, fast moment with some support. It's like this sort of jazzy.
the single backstick does crack me
It's
up.
pretty cool. Yeah. And it's an old school one too, just like straight vertical.
I like that rhythm. Is that 5-lit? 1, 2, 3, 5. 1, 2, 3, 5. Something.
Some kind of
I wouldn't
grandma.
even tell you what it is.
It's some kind of grandma's all I take it as.
It's 16 notes into 6 tempo, but it's in 3, so it's fucking pick it up.
Man.
Those things at the end is the 7 note.
It just never stops, man. The whole book is just in your face. I love it.
And then just like the build-in, the layering with the bass. To the bucket is.
Bass for real. I just love the way they play, right? Like they get the most out of the drum, right? The most resonance that I think is possible. And when you're like playing with a line that sounds like that behind you, it's like so comforting and warm. So yeah, they play that chunk again.
So pause then real quick.
Yeah, I'll speed us up through
like,
this and you guys can go.
Yeah, you talked about like the resonance and stuff. And you know, I think as far as like technique and the way that you guys like approach the hands on the stick, it doesn't seem like it's, hey, we need everybody's hands to look the same, which obviously from a physiological standpoint is pretty much impossible for everybody to hold sticks the right way just because your fingers are different lengths, your hands are different sizes,
thicknesses, palm
is
size,
there like
all that.
Yeah, all that. So is there like a specific setup you try to go for and then adjust from there, or is it just like how do your hands feel the best holding the sticks?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have like some things that we say, but I would say instead of, it's not like a recipe for this is how to play well. It's more like a set of reminders and little rules that help you move in the right direction. Because right, everyone's hands are different, and I would say that the overall like philosophy seems to be, I don't know that you could even really like write a book. If you gave me 1,000 pages in a book, I don't think I could give you all the answers to like what the approach is. And to be honest, you know, it's you know, Paul's the one who makes it happen. But in terms of sorry, what was your question?
Just as far as like, you know, how the way that you guys approach
the hands,
the technique
right?
on the hands on the sticks.
So with the technique, I mean, we're focused on it the same way as like any musician, right? Any guitar player. If you look at the best golfers in the world, they all have a different swing, right? I don't know that much about golf. Who's the best golfer right now? I've heard he has like
Scotty Scheffler, and he has like what people
awful
would
swing,
awful
right?
feet. Like people would say like you would never teach someone to do that with their feet when they swing. But
so would he be better if he fixed it, right? It's not that the goal is to look like that. Our goal is to look and have like, we have an approach that we want to look like, right? We want to look like John Leal. We want to look like Bryce Freeman, right? Like that's, you know, there's a lot of players that have a lot to offer, and you know, I would say like with anything, the goal is how it sounds, and the technique is a means to an end. So it's not, there's, you know, we give technique comments all the time. You know, I think it's just easy to focus too much on that and then miss everything else. And
Right.
so when I look at like the difference between maybe what we do and what a lot of other groups, I think it's easy if you're not familiar with it to go up and say, it seems like they're playing softer in general, and it seems like the technique isn't, you know, they don't have as defined of a technique. And I think that, you know, that's maybe a mistake in how you approach this activity versus other, you know, musical mediums, right? The best drum set players in the world, you care about the feel, you care about the way it sounds, you care about how flexible are they? Can they play with any gig? Can they play a jazz gig and then go play a country gig the next day? And I would say that that's like the most powerful thing that draws people to the group is the educational experience that you get from it, how universal what we learn is. I approach marching snare drum the same way I would approach concert marimba, which is, I know that some things I can improve with technique, but I would rather have, like, if you think of the sound as a destination and the technique as like a road, you know, you want a beautiful highway going in the right direction, but I'd rather have a dirt road going the right way than a, you know, a beautiful tollway going to the wrong place. It's not going to help me, right? And that's generally how we look at it. So we try to do it all. We try to, you know, we have the body, we have the visuals, we care about how they look, and there's a visual aspect to it, but we'll never sacrifice that for the sound. And I think that we have like a lot of moments where we're trying to create some expression that maybe doesn't exist. It didn't exist in the activity before. Actually, that's not even true. Sorry. One of Paul's like biggest influences is, I think, 1984. Is it Vanguard? There's like some drummer. I think Ralph Hardiman wrote it, and he played it for us. It's like the super quiet, tasty drum feature. So it's been around forever, right? But somewhere along the line, we felt like music equals, just tap rolls and rudiments. And in reality, like, rudiments are a way to achieve a feel, achieve a character of a piece. And I think that that's something that Paul does better than anyone I know. And bringing
well
together
said.
all of these basics of how we play, and then how do we create something that affects people and makes people feel something.
Yeah, it's all just different tools and different means to the same end. Yeah.
And that's why we get a lot of players from a lot of different places. Like, I marched with a guy who marched 09 and 10 cadets, and he came to Vanguard in 2011. You would think, how does that work? But because we're so pragmatic and we're just focused on the sound, it doesn't really matter what someone's technique was, before. It matters, what's the sound you're going to make.
True. Interesting.
Yeah.
All right, let's let this keep cooking a little bit. This is the tail end of that second rep of that phrase. We'll just go from here.
Fix my ears.
Get those earplugs in there.
By the way, shout out to the drums. Have you guys seen the rims on these drums? Did you guys get to see them up close?
I saw some pictures when
it's red chrome. If you look at the rims, and the carriers are painted blue to match the drums. I mean, Dynasty pulled up all the stops.
I saw Dynasty when they made a picture and posted. I was like, all right. Not powder coated, just red chrome.
I think that's the best looking drum I've ever seen.
The uniforms are really cool, on the field.
They worked well. Those shots are life-changing, somebody yelled.
As long as they're clean.
Yeah, that's really good. Oof. That's like butter.
Mm-hmm.
So this is like the main drum feature for the show. So it's aggressive in the context of where it's happening.
Cheese and birds.
So cool the way those shots just sort of appear out of that the pilot.
It's interesting too that you would say that, like, some people might float ideas that, like, oh, there's not like a defined technique. But I feel like if I ever watch someone like play a solo that like has been in a Renick line, I'm like, I can tell just by the way that they move, like the way the stick moves. It's more about like the motion of the stick and the pathway than it is like anything else with like the hands or the fingers or whatever.
Yep, I think that's a good way to put it. Less about hand
really
structure and more about the motion.
Yeah, because I mean the motion is what translates to the sound.
Exactly.
So again, we're focused on the sound, and the motion gets us there. So we'll make technique comments or motion comments, and I think it's always confusing to me why you would play at a really low volume and then play with a really high velocity, because it's as like the default for taps, because then the taps sort of go away and then you end up with sort of like one sound. So what we focus on is like really the opposite. I think most groups play that way nowadays. There was a while where it felt like, the goal was to have as little difference between your tap sound and your accent sound. But for us, it's the opposite. How much difference? And there's a lot of other groups that are, still sort of going back to that old school approach of getting that contrast. But the contrast, it's not like to say that we've got the biggest sword, right? It's not this like machismo thing of who's got the most difference in their taps and the accents, right? It's a means to an end. Yep. If I can do that here, then I can make this musical moment in the book happen. And so that's the idea, is that we just want to be able to have the control to create whatever music we want to create, just like any other musician. And the stuff Paul says, it tends to be less about like, here's how you do it. It's more about like, what should you think about? What should it sound like? And stuff like he's a magician when it comes to giving like just the right comment that gets someone to think about exactly the right thing, and then it's fixed. And it's crazy how after like so much time, I still learn so much from him and the rest of the staff. I think it's really in the hands of the players, and that's something that if I really liked that when I was in the group. It felt like it was my group.
Right.
It didn't feel like Paul was telling me how to play. It felt like he gave us the gift of this music, and then we got to figure out ourselves how we were going to play it. And he would give these helpful tips. And I think there's like a level of, say, respect that the staff gives to the players. We try not to like get in their faces. We don't yell at them if there's a mistake. We say, this is how we can improve it. We give them the information, and then it's their creation that they take. And I think it's reflected in the way that they play finals, for example. If they weren't really living, if they didn't feel what they wanted the music to be, you wouldn't feel it either.
True. Yeah.
Yep. Well said.
Hey.
All right. I don't know if this is a repeat phrase. We'll find out here in a second.
No, this is the top of the ballad.
Okay.
No, it seemed like it.
What you were gonna say? Ballad? What?
Yep.
Jeez, bass drums.
And that's sort of like the hit again when the brass comes in. And all that stuff there, almost on the back timeline, facing back field.
I always love those trading of accents.
That Paul's a master of putting just the right accents, the right sections to make you feel what you want.
Hey.
Yeah. I love that whole phrase. I think there's never a time that anyone could read it, from the front. So competitively, for like the percussion score alone, it's not something he wrote to contribute to that, right? It's something that he's always looking at what's the right fit to what's happening musically, and that build into that hit in the ballad, probably my favorite part of the show, because the way there's like these soloists that are coming from the brass, the way that they come together, and somehow he paces it so that it arrives just at that moment. Sometimes I feel like because I write for some groups too, and I'm jealous. I'm like, how does he get away with writing so much, in moments like that, and then it just doesn't come across like it's too much, right? If I wrote that for my high school, it would be way too much. And I think that's just if the players are able to play it with the nuance that doesn't make it seem like it's overbearing.
It does help when you have like a world-class
ensemble
too.
And the brass line helps too, for sure.
And like a world-class front ensemble too. Like, oh.
Yeah, of course.
All right, let's speed run the end of this thing here.
I think this might be the same phrase again, but we'll just let it play.
This is the closer.
Shows you how much I know.
There were some long chunks, like
some long phrases.
Mm-hmm.
Long phrases, but also long chunks. Like we would just run all of multiple movements back to back. That's the guitar handled really well. That's hard to come out of that with a space. So, do you mind going back one more time? Listen to that buzz roll, and then listen to the release of it. It goes from the loudest buzz roll to the softest. It's a quarter note triplet after the buzzes, and you don't even hear that first note. And so that's like something we'd go for, right? Is say play. It's the contrast that makes music effective.
Oh, for sure.
Everything doesn't have to be as loud as it can be, but the loud end is as loud as we can make it. I don't think anyone could say that we're not laying into like the ends of these phrases.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just how much contrast can we create? Because if you have that much space, then there's all this room to play with expression and yeah,
True.
getting the right feel to come across.
Pull the rug out from under it.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
And this little micro phrasing.
Fast rolls.
This is the last hold. It's like a 68 count hold. Hold.
It's a good drill set to get.
Yeah, right. Just stand here and ram for a while.
That's the thing. If you give me 68 counts to write something to feel like an ending, I would end it 5 separate times, right? It wouldn't feel like one cohesive thing. So it's just so impressive how he does that. And I think that contributes to like the overall music effect. Yeah, there's some things that Paul does that no one is ever going to be able to speak to. You know, he's, I think, and I think he probably wouldn't even say that he, maybe he wouldn't even be able to explain like exactly how he got to the right answer. Because like the creative side, it's hard to know. You know, it's just what he hears it.
He's got to have so much intuition at this point from all the years of experience and learning from so many people and designing for so many shows and writing so many books. There's got to be a level of just this is what it is. I can't put it on paper or words as why. I couldn't write you a book report on it, but I just know this is right intuitively.
Yeah.
And I think he even talks about how hard it is to write for those long sustains. So it's not that it's easy, but you know, he just finds a way to make it feel like this one phrase, and you don't get bored. It feels like an ending. It's just something I'm striving to be able to replicate with my own writing. I think, you know, we all are.
It's kind of like the hardest, you know, like the 1,000 hours or whatever. Like he's had, like, I'm sure a lot of it didn't obviously happen overnight because he's been doing it for so long, but just figuring out like, well, I know this doesn't work, but this is just years of experience and knowledge. So yep. I am happy to listen to it. So.
Oh yeah. I enjoy it every year. So, well, unfortunately I have to get back to work here pretty soon.
Yeah, we'll speed run this.
So we can, I'm good to wrap this up if you two are. I mean, I think we hit a lot of good topics, watched the whole book pretty much, exposed it, talked about it. And it was a blast. I'm glad we were able to squeeze this in. TJ Chiquette, thank you for connecting us with Aaron, by the way, over the summer. Super awesome. Evan, you got anything?
No, I mean, it was good to just like, you know, pick your brain and hear some of the philosophies and peel back the curtain a little bit about that. Any final words?
No, I mean, just a huge thanks to the players. I mean, the staff, the players. I think it's one of my favorite years, and I think it's easy to underestimate like how special this year was. Right, to come from a year off and then sort of be fighting this uphill battle all season, and they just stayed true to like what they, what they wanted to create. They just followed the process. Paul did his thing, we did our thing, and we were lucky enough to, be rewarded for it. But we don't do it for that reason. We do it because we want to be proud of the result. And I'm about as proud as I've ever been for any year that I've taught. I think it's every time I come back to it, I'm just amazed at what they're able to do. So looking forward to the next year. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Thank
absolutely,
you,
man.
All right, let's wrap this up. Comment, like, subscribe, share the video, Facebook, Instagram, Patreon, join button on YouTube, aged-out-podcast.com, grab a shirt and a logo sticker or Aged Out Fundamentals, drum every day. I'm going to keep bugging everybody about it because it's so beneficial. We'll see everybody in the next one.
Peace.